Hey everybody, it's the CC and JT Amateur Hour where production value is going to die, and you're going to see a lot of that today because, man, we're having so many technical issues. We're just dragging it out.
I think our technical issue is that our brain cell is out of order.
Yeah, we share a brain cell because, it'd be a waste not to do, okay, never mind. I can't complete even the thought today. It is Sunday, May 26th.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that.
Something.
It says
Yes.
May 26th. And we are here with the broadcast of a writer's podcast that we've been doing now. This is like episode 172 of our podcast.
Fourth year?
Yeah.
Yep.
We started it in the pandemic.
Lockdown, yep.
Yeah, the lockdown, and we did it just sort of, just to talk. And then we realized that we as amateur writers, well, we're professional, I guess, but we as writers who've written books and self-published books across the 5 platforms. Let me see if I can remember them. Amazon, Google, Kobo,
Barnes & Noble,
and the last one.
Oh, Amazon?
Anyway, we
Kobo,
found that we had things that we could share, and
We're not thinking of Audible, are we? Like the
No.
Anyway, they're on our website. Go to our website and you'll find out what the platforms are.
Yeah, and you could tell us because that'd be appreciated. Google, Apple. Did we say Apple?
Yes.
Did we say Barnes & Noble? Did we say Google? Did we say Kobo? And we said Amazon.
Right.
Okay.
So I guess we did have them.
Okay, now that we've wasted your time with our memory fart, we are here to talk about a couple of things. We talk about our current projects, our current things, and we talk about lessons that we learned on the road from our big-ass trip 2024.
Yes.
If you are late to the thing, we're kind of wondering how you missed it, because we had social media all over the place. Yeah, but we did a big-ass trip last month into this month.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, late April into mid-May.
Yeah.
Yep.
And where we traveled 7,500 miles, we went from Carson City to Utah.
Park City.
Do you think we can name the 25 states?
I can.
Hit it. And the province.
So we started out Carson City to Park City.
Utah.
Park City, Utah to Casper, Wyoming.
Right.
Casper, Wyoming to Bloomington, Minnesota.
Right.
Bloomington, Minnesota to Munson, Michigan.
Well, we went through Wisconsin.
Through Wisconsin, yes.
Right.
Okay, so I'm adding the states we didn't stay in.
Yeah.
Then we went up into London, Ontario, Canada. Came back down through Niagara Falls, spent the night in Cooperstown.
Right.
Drove through Vermont, New Hampshire, stayed in Freeport, Maine. Then we did Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Spent the night in Gettysburg. Went from Gettysburg to Ocean City, Maryland, and then back to Del Mar. Popped into Delaware. Then we did Virginia, North Carolina. We stayed in Greensboro. Then we did North Carolina, back into Virginia.
And by way of Kentucky.
By way of Kentucky, right. And then spent the night in Nashville, Tennessee. When we went from Tennessee through Illinois,
right,
into Missouri, spent the night in Oak City,
right,
Colby, Kansas, Grand Junction, Colorado, Ely, Nevada, back home.
Okay, that's the last time we'll do that. But we managed in that trip, as you were counting along, because we all knew you were, that we managed to do 25 states and 1 province during this big loop, and it was kind of amazing, and we had a bit of fun. And so what we're doing as part of our current projects is we're putting together a
Bat book.
The Bat book, the big ass trip book of our memories and pictures and collections and stuff like that. I'm going to try just publish it just for fun, just so if anything, it's for us.
Well, also, I think it's a good test. We do want to publish some nonfiction books through our 2 More Books platform. Plus, we wrote a fiction romance together, but we're working out the nuances of doing this nonfiction,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out what to emphasize, what we want to include, how many photos, layout, things
Yep.
like that. So we'll be learning a lot from this experience.
Yeah, that's a good little thing. And of course, since it's nonfiction, we can't create the world. We have to use the world. So we have to
Yes.
use facts, fact-based writing, which, it's somebody once said that the difference between fact and fiction is that fact has to make sense. And, the deal is nonfiction has to too, because, we hit 25 states. And if anybody ever reads this thing in any of those other 24 states that we've been to, then it has to relate to them, and it has to be held up to the light by them as being truthful and correct.
Well,
So-
there's also the fact, though, that we're doing it with an outsider's point of view of having visited.
Right.
Plus, it is creative nonfiction
Yeah.
because it will be including some of our experiences and our impressions of what we saw. So it won't be, the standard textbook version of nonfiction. It's more of a creative nonfiction project.
But still, it still has to be able to hold up to the light.
For sure.
And so we're kind of looking forward to that. As for other projects for our company, 2 more books, we are working on a marketing plans, and we are working on getting the gumption to go out and, participate in local events and local meetings.
Yes, we will probably be doing our first writers group meeting in July because the timing on June didn't work out for us. And this morning I saw an advance notice for a meeting or an event, a new event that will be happening locally in the fall that I think we're going to sign up for. So we can talk through the preparations we do for that and maybe our writers group experiences along the way too.
Yeah, CEO. I just go where she sends me. I'm just the talent.
Also, I went to visit my former workplace the other day and was laying some groundwork there too for at least our travel book, because I did work in a library and archive, so I have connections in the Nevada library community. So we'll see what we can do on that front too.
Yep. So we are continuously working. And as for the writing part of things, the space epic that I've been working on for years is at the editor for another pass.
Book 1. It's
book
a
1.
trilogy.
Yeah, it's a trilogy. So book 1 of the 3 is at the editor for another pass. Yay! So we're getting there. Woo! And Zoe is, and I keep going back and forth as to what to do with that. So that's problematic.
Maybe that's something to talk through in a future podcast.
Yeah, because it's difficult. Because like I said earlier, fiction has to make sense. And I'm not sure if the book really makes sense, but you read it, so...
I think it holds up, but that's just me.
Yep. And for writing on your part is that you've got so much company business and some other things that are coming up. It's other than the Bat book, writing's not really happening. Although you did some outlining.
I did write a few little reminiscences from the trip to kind of get the Bat book rolling, and we will obviously, both of us, be adding to that as time goes on. I have to finalize the outline for the book that I will be writing that I did a little bit of research on during the trip, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is some of that research. So I am working, I'm not physically writing currently. I did do a little writing once we got back though.
So writing is happening.
It is.
It's taking its time, but it's happening. Okay. Let's see. Anything else on local projects or anything like that?
No, I think
it doesn't sound like we're doing a lot, but we really are doing a lot.
We are.
Yeah, it's hard to find time sometimes to do all the things we want to do.
Well, I think looking toward the end of the year, I'm guessing maybe we will do like a year-end wrap-up or something episode based on our experiences from the time I retired to us kind of trying to build out our company, so we can reflect back on how this process went. And obviously it's a bumpy road because we're doing this as total newbies. We've been writing for a long time, but the business aspect of it is new. So I'm thinking that looking back, we're going to find that we maybe did really well in some areas, we didn't do too great in other areas, and hopefully we'll have some helpful advice after, as we head into 2025.
Yeesh. Oh, there goes my back.
We're almost halfway into
Yeah.
24 already.
Yeah. And
Wild.
2025, a quarter of a century. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I can't even.
I can't even comprehend that. Okay. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about we talked about this trip took almost 3 weeks, exactly, 1 day short, and 7,500 miles, 25 states, 1 province, all these stops, all these nights, and we're going to talk about the big assist that Cece got, and it happened on the very first day, and we didn't even know it was there.
Nope.
And it just sort of popped up, so we made a stop, and Cece, take us there.
So our initial drive took us out of Carson City on Highway 50 a little bit, and then we took a jog up to Interstate 80, which would take us into Utah. And we were driving along, and obviously, since we're doing so much driving each day, we were changing back and forth during the traveling, the driving duties, basically. So we were looking for good places to stop to have a bathroom break. Sometimes we'd get a snack or gas. But we were also looking for interesting places. There was one rest stop that we stopped at that was, it was Nevada rest stop, very
outside Fernley. That Fernley, yeah.
Great view, but it kind of tied in too, because I believe that was also along the California Trail.
It was.
So the stop that we made was just outside of Elko at what is known as the California Trail Interpretive Center. It looks like it opened in 2012. It was a project that was done in conjunction with U.S. Senator Harry Reid, who was a huge boon for the state of Nevada. In fact, they renamed the Las Vegas airport in honor of him. It was McCarran. It is now Harry Reid International. And they're still, it's so new, they're still changing the signage at the airport. But Harry Reid was huge. He was a Nevada native. He was, he became Senate Majority Leader. And that was amazing for Nevada because we have so little support really on the national scale. And he helped pass through a public law that helped to fund this interpretive center. So this was not to say that Nevada doesn't have great museums. There are a lot of great Nevada state museums. There are small local museums that sometimes have the best research information. But this one was done at the federal level in conjunction with the Bureau of Land Management, which, not to get political, but...
BLM is not really famous, and it's not just really those initials,
popular.
But the BLM initials in Nevada have long been...
Problematic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so anyway, so we got this spiffy little museum.
And it's still fairly new. It's a little over a decade old, so it's shiny. Mm-hmm. It had some great exhibits. There were a lot of full-size Conestoga wagons, both outside and inside.
So what was the purpose of this museum in your mind?
Oh, the purpose of the museum is to interpret the westward migration, the manifest destiny of people moving from what was then the West, which actually we now call the Midwest, to the Western United States, to the Pacific coast. And one of the routes along our trip, or their trip at the time, was the California Trail. And Interstate 80 kind of follows along the California Trail for quite a bit. So this is it's advertised at least as a world, research facility for people who want to look into the history of the California Trail and people migrating to the Western United States, or the West, because they had not yet incorporated into the United States. So it is located near what's known as the 40-mile desert, which was a really harsh area. They'd already passed through Salt Lake City, and we would drive that direction through the Bonneville Salt Flats, which is quite a harsh environment. The 40-mile desert was also a very harsh environment because, as we saw throughout our trip, once you get to the east side of the Continental Divide, there's water everywhere. They got to this side, and especially in places like the 40-mile desert, it became a sink, which meant that the water just disappeared. So there is the Humboldt River in the area, but the 40-mile desert is dry.
And it just need to point out the Humboldt Desert, Interstate 80, the California Trail. The reason that the California Trail and Interstate 80 follow that is because of the Humboldt River.
Yes,
so
yes.
Just to point that out just very quickly.
Right.
Okay, so we got the background, we got the purpose. We go inside, or actually we don't even have to go inside, but we'll go inside.
Right.
And what do we find?
We find, like I mentioned, there were Conestogas outside, but there was also a full-size Conestoga inside that you could actually walk in to see what kind of space.
Define Conestoga.
It's basically, they called them the prairie schooners, I believe. Mm-hmm. So it's basically a buckboard, so a kind of a transportation wagon where they would transport supplies with a canvas covering over it. It would have arched supports and then a canvas cover to help protect their supplies, and it allowed them a place to sleep away from the elements. Not everyone would go through in this type of transportation, because we stopped at another place the next day, the Martin's Cove, which talked about hand carts, which was a totally different way, and that was the Oregon Trail. But it was funny that these two happened so quick, so early in our trip. But the getting a sense of what it felt like to be in the wagon, they had a representation of the 40-mile desert with items that had been found there. So it looked a little bit like a junkyard, but people had to cast off the things that they were carrying cross country with them, their precious items, because they couldn't, their livestock was suffering. They were having problems pulling the wagon, so they had to lighten the load. And a lot of these things are actually on display in the museum, so you can see what a hardship it was for the people. You are out, when you step outside the building, you are in the environment that they were walking through. And we were there on a somewhat stormy day. It wasn't terrible weather, but you think about if they're going through in the summer, which was the optimal time of year, it would have been terrible. Yeah. So the way the items were displayed, their recreation of the 40-mile desert, they actually had some items left outside the building too.
But they also
talked about various stops along the way.
Yeah, various stops along the way, very photographic images of the various stops in California, which some of which we were familiar with the California side, because we'd seen it, obviously, on I-80 in California.
Yep. So it gives you an overall view of the entire experience, but it allows you to actually put yourself into the place of the people that were going through at the time, which was really helpful to me, because the backstory of the book that I will be writing is someone who comes across country. She's not a 49er, she's not doing the California Trail, but she's taking that route. And to see what kind of harsh conditions they would go through was very helpful.
And so we also picked up some of the local phrasing, like seeing the elephant, which is, and why don't you go ahead and explain what seeing the elephant is? You
explain the elephant. I think you like that one.
The seeing the elephant basically came out of tall tales that everybody has when they're on the trail. They want to tell their tall tales about surviving the experience, which by itself is a big deal.
It's huge.
But then you have to embellish things a little bit, So they would say seeing the elephant is which of course is not something you're going to see along the California Trail, but it represents the tall tales that they told as they crossed it.
Which is funny, because the experience itself was such a major accomplishment for people that having to embellish the story really wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
But you think of people like the Donner Party, for example, which is probably the most famous of the California Trail stories, is that that they timed it wrong and things went south in a big way. So embellishing something like that really isn't necessary, because the story itself is horrible.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there were people who probably made the trip with maybe easier. They timed it right. They had the right amount of supplies. Their animals didn't suffer and things like that. So maybe that's where they felt they had to embellish.
One thing that struck me though from the exhibits is the ingenuity of the things that they did, and the ingenuity of the gadgets that they had and the tools that they used, which again, we as a race are rather arrogant, I should say, because we think that something that even happens in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is ancient history. And so if it's ancient history, it's primitive.
Right.
But the difference between the time of the California Trail crossings and the difference now is basically the tools. They had the same level of ingenuity, the same level of stubbornness, the same level of grit. Everything was the same of the human experience. It's just the level of tools and ingenuity. I don't even want to say that, because the things that they brought with them definitely showed ingenuity.
Well, one of the things they had in the museum, funnily enough, was almost the exact same sewing machine that I have in the room over here. It's a treadle sewing machine complete with the table.
Mhm.
We know for a fact, the two of us, because we moved it, that's a heavy piece of equipment.
Oh my God.
It is very heavy. So the fact that they had this in the wagon, obviously it meant a lot to them. They would have had to make their own clothes.
It's an industry.
It is. And they had to make their own clothes, and it was an easier way because
Mhm.
hand sewing versus machine sewing, it can really speed up the process.
Mhm.
So the fact that they had to dump it was huge for this person.
Yeah.
And but you know, it was things like that. There were people, I think, that took pianos with them,
Mhm.
like the smaller, maybe stand-up pianos. But even so, that would take up the good portion of a Conestoga. But if that was their, you know, they were an
Livelihood.
entertainer or something,
Yeah, their livelihood.
how are they going to make a living when they get where they're going if they don't have the tools of their trade?
Okay, so let's talk about the book, and let's talk about how you're going to actually use this stuff in your book.
So we went to the gift shop. They have a very nice gift shop there. And I got a book, which I did not expect to get at all. It's called The Prairie Traveler by Randolph Marcy, Captain of the U.S. Army. The original printing date was 1859,
Oh,
I believe.
God. Just a couple of years before I was born.
Oh, shush. 1859. So this was a contemporary tool, basically for people who were planning to travel the California Trail, and it gave them some ideas. It has itineraries in the back, which I just noticed, that tell the different routes. So from where to where, how far it was, what kind of water was available, and things like that. Plus, it also gave advice on, you know, the animals. There were some illustrations.
That's a bar.
It is the grizzly. Somebody is taking down a grizzly
that's
from
taking
horseback.
literary license because the grizzly wouldn't
Well,
do
this
that.
looks like an illustration from a dime novel.
Yeah.
But this would have been something that people who were going to take the trip on the California Trail would have referred to this so that they could plan ahead. It was like us and our road atlas.
Right.
You know, you kind of look at what is the terrain like. So this is going to help me with the, hopefully, my story is set a little bit after. It's more of just post Pony Express, and we also had a couple Pony Express stops, but the transportation was in transition. They didn't quite have the Transcontinental Railroad yet. So mine will probably be more something like the Overland or Butterfield Stage Company, but they would have had to go through this same terrain. And I wanted some idea of what it would have been like to experience that trip.
So do you think, before you start diving deeply into your book, do you think we're going to be heading back to the California Trail Interpretive Center? And
I think what I'd like to do is actually get a first draft of the book done and then go back and kind of fill in the details a little bit, because I have a pretty good idea. We're familiar with Nevada and the environment here. So since most of the book actually takes place in our home city, I have a lot of that. And I may be doing some videos kind of on the history of our city that I'll put up on YouTube as I'm doing some things for the book. But when we go back kind of to flesh out the backstory a little bit, I may want to go back and revisit.
it's definitely worth the stop of,
Yes.
especially if you're, you know, any kind of a 19th century nerd for that part of American history, because it was a courageous leap to make that journey across the country. And so,
Well, I don't know about, well, I do know about your family. Your family talked about taking the train across country and carrying the clock. But my family, I believe it was my great-grandparents. One of my great-grandparents actually went across country in a wagon.
Yeah.
And so that, to put that in context, here I am in 2024, and not my grandparents, but my great-grandparents. So not that far removed would have gone cross country. And that was almost 2 centuries ago now. So, you know, generationally, for some people, it's not that, you know, distant a history. There's still, my grandmother was born in 1906, but her siblings, some of them were born in the 1890s.
Yeah.
And I met them. So, and you met, you know, your great-grandmother.
My great-grandmother, who was born in the 19th century, who was a California native. So
we have connections to people who had experiences, maybe not at that specific time, but knew people from that time.
Yeah,
And
so
it's not that far from us.
it's not that far. So, and again, that was something that we were reminded of on the trip too, is, Americans love their history, and more, what seems to be more important is they love to use that history to earn a buck. This, by the way, the Interpretive Center is free.
Yes.
But my point being is everywhere we went to this travel, there were always these museums, and antiques, lots of antiques.
Oh my gosh, Virginia especially. When we went down to Del Mar.
Oh yeah, but and all these places that you can stop and spend $1 or $2, or more than $1 or $2.
This wasn't all that expensive. We did try to keep the souvenirs down to a minimum because we have so much in the house. But I felt that this was useful and not overly expensive. You bought a couple of books also. Actually, the autographed copy you bought wasn't as expensive as we expected. So
yeah, where did you say you threw that?
It's over here.
Okay, but the point being is that America not only loves history, it loves to earn money off of history. And actually, CC's book is kind of a point of that. And if I write my book, my Gettysburg book, that'll be another example of that. And there's nothing wrong with it. We all like to have our fun with it, but fiction has to make sense too, and which is why we go to this effort of making sure that what we're saying,
is
aligns.
Accurate.
Yeah, is accurate and aligns with history.
Well, and that is tricky because I worked in a historical repository, and what is the common phrase? History was written by the victors.
Yeah.
That their history can be very subjective. So looking at primary source historical documents and interpreting them, because what the person who created the document meant might not be what the person who sees it interprets it as.
Yeah.
So there's also that you have to be careful about interpreting history, because what you think may be not what was meant at the time.
Right. Okay. Anyway, good stuff. And we're going to continue in this podcast. We're going to be continuing this podcast talking about certain stops along the way. I don't know what we're going to talk about next. We want to talk about Niagara Falls next?
That would be fun. We could talk about expectation versus reality.
Yeah, Niagara Falls are all, power of nature.
Oh my gosh, we had so many fun experiences. The Great Lakes, the Rocky Mountains, like the high Rockies.
So maybe we could talk a little bit about the power of nature in the next one. Okay, so, hey, we're actually getting organized here. Usually we're not this organized.
Well, maybe talking this through for the podcast will help us figure out how to organize our book.
Okay.
So.
Sounds good. Alrighty, with that in mind, is there anything else you want to bring up about either the California Interpretive Center, anything that we talked about in this podcast, or?
No, I just, if you are not a history nerd, why not? History is fascinating, and learning all the different nuances of how people interpret history is awesome. So if you haven't been going to museums and things like that, definitely go out there, find some history books, not necessarily history textbooks, but maybe accounts written by people at the time or something, because you might find out history is a lot more interesting than you think.
You never know who you're related to until you do something like that.
Oh, it's amazing what genealogy is another rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah. Also, don't believe anything your parents say about who you're related to.
No.
Well, I thought for a while that I was related to somebody, found out, nope, not going to happen. Okay, anyway.
Well, it turned out that there was someone with the same name, but it was not that related to that historic person.
Anyway.
Yep.
Anyway,
Anyway,
you can find out about these interesting little things in our podcast by going to our website at www.carsonhume.com, where we have over 170 podcasts on help writers be writers. And we hope that by talking about a little bit about not only about writing but history, but interpreting history, and going to museums and interpretive centers, it'll help you as a writer be able to present that flavor of reality that you string through your fictions, which is what we're trying to do. Anything else at all? Are we good?
No, just if you ever do get a chance to do a cross-country trip on like the one we just did, think twice.
Yeah, really. Okay, so next week we'll be here, same bat time, same bat channel. As not only as we talk about the power of nature in our next podcast, we're also going to talk about something that really happened some stupid thing that happened 42 years ago. Some incredibly stupid thing that happened 42 years ago.
What could you be referring to?
I don't know, but what we're going to call that not forecasting.
Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. Okay, we've kept these people in there long enough. Sitting over there, CC.
And over there's JT.
We hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful week. And if you have any feedback, shoot back at us at www.carsonhume.com. For now, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.